Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's comes at us from Martin. People will ask, why not Residual Blight? But the Lynx song is far underrated, I believe. The whole Apocalyptics album by Kriegsmaschine is really good and totally worth a complete review, and it contains Residual Blight. But this song is from 2010, and you can hear how good Darkside is on the drums already. So that's what we're going to be looking at. I've praised Darkside's drumming on Exercises in Futility by the band Mgwa, which I'm still probably pronouncing wrong, but I think it's really one syllable on that. It's just, I can't do that. But today we're going to be checking out Kriegsmaschine, which is, I suppose, a band that Darkside was in prior to that. Or maybe in, I don't know. Y'all will have to let me know. We're looking at Fear and Loathing in Gethsemane, which is quite a title. This comes off of the Transfigurations EP that came out in 2010. It's probably black metal, right? Let's just do it. All right, dive straight in. Let's see what Kriegsmaschine is bringing to the table today. So a fun little back and forth there between a higher riff and a lower one. There are some nice variations to each of them too. Like that one actually begins the elevation earlier than I would expect. And this one has a fun little rhythm in it. Okay, this is interesting. We'll talk about this afterwards. is the second time I've heard some really fun cymbal work. But you can definitely tell this is a bit of a less experienced Dark Side on drums. Turn the snare off for this. Oh, jeez. What a funky nu metal idea right here on the drums. Oh, this is great. Even the bass guitar and bass kick, having those rhythmic bursts. Like the long held out note against the faster 16th notes on the lead guitar. We're back to this. So Right. So that's a black metal song. I think more interesting than what it does traditionally is what it does differently than that. There is a lot of this track that is blast beats, lots of bass kick, growling. I don't actually know what type of vocal this is. There are parts that definitely feel growled, other parts that feel shouted almost, somewhere between like a growl and a punk yell. So that was interesting. Um, and then, the guitars doing fast texture work. Um, and the bass just hiding for a lot of it. No, the bass is pretty low in the mix, but I feel like it's clearer than usual too. And I got to hear basically how it lines up with the bass kicks a lot. It just really helps to fill out the low end on this track. There are very few sections where the bassist decides to work with the guitar. It really is a lot of lining up with the bass kick on this one, which I don't know how normal that is because majority of the time I can't hear the bass in black metal, so I actually don't know what the bass usually does. I don't know what's standard for for a black metal bassist to do. Do they line up with the bass kick? Do they line up with the guitar? Do they do their own things? I don't know. Usually they're invisible. So it's kind of nice being able to hear the bass through most of this. Uh, but there's a lot of sections of that. Just a lot of sound thrust into my mind. I'm not as keen on those sections. Yeah, surprise, surprise. But I did think it was interesting to see where they deviated and how they deviated. Particularly the the guitars. I thought this was really interesting because near the beginning of this, actually I think it was the intro to the song, we just kind of get these long held out notes. Now, I don't think they're technically that long, probably quarter notes now that I think about it, but they just feel very long for black metal, which plays with 16th notes. And so this is 16th notes are 4 times as fast, or you can get 4 times as more notes into a beat than a quarter note. So we're this feels a quarter of the speed that I'm used to with black metal. Now there's still a lot of atmosphere. The guitars are massively distorted, lots of compression and white noise and all that stuff to give it that fuzz, right? But it's just these longer notes, which kind of in my mind tends to create the same effect anyways. I've mentioned that a lot of black metal, much like shoegaze, once you get to a certain point of production and a certain amount of compression and overdrive and all of this stuff, you can, and often it's a main part of finding this texture, is you lose the attack. So you don't actually hear the strumming of the string anymore, you just hear the notes, you just hear the texture of the note. And so to me, these notes might as well be completely sustained, long held out notes. They are playing ridiculously fast, but all I hear is a sustained note, where the attack itself is getting lost into the production of it all. And so for them to be at the beginning and I can hear the attack and it's just this sustained note over and over, I'm like, yeah, that's what black metal usually sounds like to me anyways. But now I can hear the attacks and they're in frequency. And I find that interesting. But yeah, primarily focusing on atmosphere here, which black metal in general, but this song too likes to focus on atmosphere. And I thought that was a really interesting way to start the song, kind of with a calmer backbeat and less guitar playing, but a similar effect atmospherically. We get a little bit of the vocals here too. Nice introduction to the lower growl. So that was kind of nice. Hearing the bass from time to time was pretty cool. There was that one moment I pointed out where we were getting this fun little punk beat on the drums with I think it was mostly the cymbals and the snare with the beads turned off, so we don't actually have the rattle or the buzz of the snare. We just have that sort of hollow thunk of hitting the drum head. And this beat that we had between these two parts was very punk, but then we also had these spurts, dig-a-doot, dig-a-dig-doot, dig-a-doot, dig-a-doot, dig-a-dig-doot, these spurts of bass kicks, and the bass guitar was in on those too, and that's something that you can hear in hardcore punk, you can hear in post-hardcore. Emo eventually was influenced by these sounds and incorporated it in there too, and this whole beat right here felt so beyond black metal. I don't know what it is. This isn't the first time we've heard punk ideas, particularly in the drum work of black metal, and it still cracks me up. It's just one of those things that in my mind, I know that there is this relationship between black metal and punk. But still, it blows me away when I hear these punk patterns show up in black metal. And that just sent me. That was hilarious. Because the dude's growling, very metal. The guitars are doing their metal stuff over there. Like, this is still clearly a metal song. But the bassist and drummer's like, hey, you know that punk song you checked out the other day? Let's write something inspired by that drum part you liked, and they like just sneak this punk idea in, and I love it. It's just a nice way to spice the song up and create a little bit of contrast there in the middle of the track. I mean, after this, we went right back to blast beats, so you know. It's not like it was a big moment of the song, but it stood out to me. I thought that was a pretty cool part. Um, What else? Was there anything else that really stood out to me on this one? Oh yeah, dude. So we got a little bit of clean vocals on this. I mean, they're like low and kind of raspy and kind of feeling very uh, gothic metal kind of style. Maybe a little bit less of the dreariness, but still going for that lower energy, lower pitch style that I sort of associate with gothic metal. And that was a nice way, again, to introduce a little bit of contrast in the middle of the song, and kind of keep things semi-interesting. Every part of this song has a very clear black and inspiration to it. Nothing in this song really deviates too far away, but there's usually one thing in some of these sections like, oh, that's interesting, that's different, trying to change things up. I get it, I like it. But at the end of the day, this is a very straightforward black metal track, and it's just very aggressive and in your face and blast beats and 16th notes and growling, and I've there comes a point when I just don't have anything to add to that other than saying it's there in the song. Kind of curious how much longer we're going to keep doing black metal reactions. Eventually there will be no more words to say. But there is something interesting in this, though. This is 5 years before Darkside would be featured on uh, Exercises in Futility. And while that album did not consistently hit me as far as his drumming goes, there were many sections on that album that surprised me. And particularly, I'm not going to lie, I still return to minutes 2 through about 4.5 of Exercise 5. The drumming in that is just fantastic. And the good thing about the drum cam is that it isolates the drum bit a bit more. And so you kind of don't get the growling and the screaming and the guitar work. You really get to hear the drums, which are phenomenal. So I'm happy that video exists. I've gone back and listened to the studio version. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, you can still hear it, but give me that drum cam video. That's where I prefer to listen to that. But it's really interesting to listen to this half a decade prior and hear some of the ideas start to form. The requester, was that Martin? Had mentioned, Martin had mentioned that you can still hear that Darkside's already a talented drummer. And I agree with that. There is a lot of stuff in here that I think works really well. First of all, the dude is just on time. That is not something I can say about every black metal drummer. In fact, the more into lo-fi production we get, it seems the more fans prefer sloppy drumming, which is just another reason I tend to stick to the higher fidelity production black metal, because there's a better chance the band is going to be more precise with their playing. And I think Darkside is, even at this stage in his life, just a nice featured drummer for black metal with precision. Even in many of these faster sections, and this song feels pretty fast. I'd be interested to hear what the BPM is. I don't know why I never jotted that down. I guess it didn't dawn on me I would be talking about that. But it's a pretty fast song. And when those blast beats come in, I don't think there is much of a difference in space between them. Now, granted, we're talking about playing really fast. So, the difference in space, we're going to be talking milliseconds anyways. Can any of us really perceive a 5 to 10 millisecond difference? Oh, he came in, 6 milliseconds early on that one. No, we're not going to pick that up. So there's a chance it isn't robotically perfect, but it is close enough that the song never drags or rushes. And I think that that is phenomenal. But I do find that this feels early. This feels like a Dark Side who's a bit less experienced. I don't really hear many of the high concept drum parts in here. Some rhythmic elements that I think will eventually be extrapolated into more dynamic melodic drumming. Sure, the rhythms are there through most of this. There's nice flourish throughout this track too, right off the bat. I think this was within the first 10 or 15 seconds. There's a little bit of light cymbal playing to kind of set the stage before the song proper starts, like we're in the intro phase. And he's kind of like ting, 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 hits like a couple of quarter notes, and then this really tight roll, like 3 or 5 hits off the cymbal to kind of indicate, the intro's done. We're going to be moving into the first verse now. So there's really nice bits of flourish throughout here. And, listening to some of the ideas, even during the like blast beats or the 16th note bass kick sections, and listening to some of the rhythmic flourishes he'll throw in. Maybe he stays on the snare, but where the snare might have been 2 and 4 originally, now there's a little bit of syncopation to it. Maybe he plays around with the hi-hat just a little bit. You can hear the ideas beginning to form, but he isn't quite doing that melodic drumming yet, where we see on Exercise 5, where he is all over the entire kit for multiple minutes straight. And so I like this as a bit of history. This is not a song I will be returning to. It's very straightforward black metal for most of it. But I do like hearing this and being like, okay, it's nice to see somebody who I hold in very high regard as an extremely talented musician in their earlier age and kind of being able to see like the glimmer of that skill. You can see it beginning to form, but they're definitely not there yet. And I always thought that was interesting because, many of the musicians that people, for lack of a better phrase, put on pedestals, it's usually once they're great. It's very rare, and this is normal for all bands. Most bands don't have a big fandom when they're small. It's when they get big that they get well known, and then they get well known for the songs when they were big, right? This cyclical thing right here. You either have to be a super fan and decide to go back and listen to their older stuff, or you have to be one of the lucky few who usually just kind of happen to run into them when they're smaller or less talented or stuff like that. And so like here, my introduction to Dark Side and most of my exposure to Dark Side is when he's already been a machine on the drums. And this is just very cool. A reminder that we all come from small beginnings, you know? No matter how good you are, even if you are one of the greatest greats, you've gone down in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, you're well known, anytime someone brings up the best guitarist, you're always in that list. You started somewhere. And I always like being reminded of that and seeing evolution. I think that is one of the things I love most. And it's one of the reasons why I like to go back and listen to albums chronologically. Not because of any connected story between albums or anything like that. I prefer to see the growth of things. When I watch shows or films, even if the films are disconnected, I want to watch them in order. Even if the TV show is an anthology, I want to watch it in order because of the writing, the cinematography, the DP work. All of this is going to improve over the course of the series. I like seeing that. I don't know what it is about humans and growth, but it fascinates me. And so, like I said, this isn't something I think I'm going to return to ever again. This is just not what I like in black metal, and I'm not a big fan of black metal to begin with. But I am so glad this got brought to my attention. It's just not something I always think about, especially for something like this. Right? I'm not going to seek this out. Early black metal with people who, before they really, cut their teeth and had the chops that they developed. yeah, I mean, this isn't something I'm going to seek out. But I feel like maybe I should sometimes when I do find somebody I really enjoy as a musician in a genre I don't like. Kind of see where they came from. Let me check out some lyrics on this and we're going to wrap it up. All right. So I did want to see who the vocalist was because most of the song felt very familiar to me. Um, and this album shares the vocalist and the drummer from Exercises in Futility. We have M on vocals and guitars and Dark Side on drums. This one also, though, has a separate bassist where M plays bass on Exercises, Destroyer played bass on this album. So Kriegsmaschine is actually just Ungwa with an extra person in it. And I think that's why it feels so similar in a lot of ways. Also, because of that, surprise, surprise, the lyrics are about spiritual nihilism, about somebody who wanders between the sins and the sights. Like a shattered vessel, they'll never sail these waters again. So they're already feeling like the best times are behind them. Says that they descend to the borders of the divine being and find nothing. They go to a world that's a gateway to the dark and cold deserts of mute, inanimate nothing. Now I've thought about that. If it's nothing, can you really describe it as mute and inanimate? Nothing doesn't move and nothing doesn't sound either, or make sounds, but it's also nothing. I think it's really difficult to ascribe actions to that which does not exist. It's, in a sense, technically correct, but it's also in another sense technically incorrect. I find that to be a really interesting description there. It says that I've entered the path that I never wanted. I lost this life for ash and mud, and my father left me the way that I never wanted, and now keep silent in my last sacrifice. Only emptiness stares at me from the abyss. So there's nothing in their life beyond cold nothingness. Yeah, that should be exactly what I expect from M's vocal styles. Or I should say lyrical stylings. That kind of fits with the song because, a lot of this song. Nah, I don't. Yeah, I'm going to go that route. A lot of this song I feel nothing towards too. That's very subjective, though. I appreciate that. But black metal, I don't get any connection to it generally. And a vast majority of this song I just didn't connect to. It's just there. It's noise, it's static. Maybe a cool little ostinato in the guitar that I can lock onto for a second, but it's going to loop for a minute or so. I'm going to get bored of that. It's going to make me wish there was something more. And that's sort of what well, maybe not wishing for more. He's more of an accepting of the nothingness, but like I said when the song was over, that was definitely black metal. And I'm starting to kind of get this idea of nihilism and black metal and how they get married, but I think my perspective on it's very different from the people playing it and the people enjoying it. Uh, I hope you know that's mostly in jest. Um, but these are my thoughts. Kriegsmaschine's Fear and Loathing in Gethsemane. Still, what a wild title. Uh, Let me know what you thought of this, if there's anything that stood out to you, anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on. Maybe you have your own interpretation of things. Please put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening. whenever you choose to watch my videos.